Okay, I'm working on a 2004 Buick LeSabre. I'm going to be replacing this cam sensor on here, and so we're just going to go ahead and get started. Okay, so I'm just using a 15mm on our tensioner here, and going to be using a cheater bar too. This has quite a bit of tension, and we're going to go, I'm going to push up, in other words back in that direction, and just flip it up over the top of that alternator. Now I should also point out that I got a PO 340 code that specifically kept coming back and pointing out the cam sensor, and the issue here is not wanting to start after it's been running. I mean, you could run it around, it runs fine, and once you kill it, no start. So that's what we're going to be trying to fix here. Okay, for removing these, you can use a 5/16 or an 8mm, and I was just holding this by hand. They wasn't too tight and taking them loose, but you could leave the belt on, I guess, before you take these loose. And you could also use a wrench or something to hold one nut while you're breaking another one loose. I've done that. They're just not too terribly tight. So we're just going to go ahead and get this removed from the water pump right now. Okay, and that just pops off there just like that, and now we can actually get in here and see what we're doing. And our cam sensor is going to be right down in here, and it's still difficult for me to point out, but it's just kind of hidden down in here. Give me just a second. Okay, so right here where my finger's pointed, just right to the kind of rear of the water pump, you can see the connector right here, and then we've got a 10mm right there. So you just come right down in behind, and it's going to be right back in there. So you can just kind of get the connector and pop it loose and just pull it over out of the way a little bit, and then we'll get a little ratchet in here and get that 10mm loose. Pop that out of there. Okay, there's that bolt. A 3/8 actually works better. Now here's the sensor. Just wiggled it right out of there. Okay, so we got our replacement part here, and these are going to run you about 35 to 40 bucks at the parts store. So we're just going to go ahead and get this back into place. Like I said, it's pretty straightforward. Once you get that little cover off for the water pump, there's really nothing to it. Okay, so we've just set it back down here in place. Here, as you can see, it just pops right in there, and just line up your little bolt hole, and then we'll go ahead and reconnect this connector here, and it just goes back in just like that. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and slip this back on to the water pump here, and I'm just going to hand snug these little bolts, and then once I think we get the belt on, I'll go ahead and just finish tightening them down. Just snugging them down. Don't have to be just terribly tight, and you can put a little Loctite on these too if you'd like. Okay, and this is how the belt is going back. We've got it routed down around here. The compressor, it's going up around the tensioner this way, up over these, and then lastly we'll get it up over the top of the alternator. So we'll go ahead and get our tensioner pulled back here. Okay, this is a follow-up. We had got a code for the bad cam sensor. We replaced that. However, it didn't fix the issue with not starting. Just to show you what I've been doing, I've performed a test to check for voltage, and I've been checking this wire, which is the second, and the third from the left. This second is supposed to get 10 when you connect it, and the third one's supposed to get 12 volts. However, there is a particular way you have to connect your multimeter, and you can Google that. So these two here that are directly on the left and to the right of the bolt that goes through here, those you're supposed to monitor. You put your probe, your red probe, onto that while you turn your crank slowly with the ratchet, and it's supposed to read or register 5 to 6 volts on both of those, and I wasn't getting 5 to 6 volts on either one. I was getting nothing whatsoever. So according to the test, that has, you know, proven that the crank sensor is in fact bad, you know, which I wanted to make sure before I went any further. So now I'm just in the process. Like I said, I got 12 volts and the 10 volts was fine. So I knew that the ICM was getting power and doing its job that's sitting under these coil packs. So the only thing that it leaves is the crank sensor. So I'm going to go ahead, and right now I'm just got my impact, and we're going to go ahead and get this crank off of here. There's if you look in there, you've got some, I think they're quarter, I'll have to look and see what the size. They're a small bolt that goes in there. You got to get 3 bolts in there with a puller to yank it off there. You don't have to get a lot of threads in there, but you got to get in there and get your bolts in there to hold your puller. So, but first thing, we just got to get this bolt off. I'm going to use an impact. If you don't have an impact, you're going to have to make you a little tool for holding that crank pulley still. So I'm going to follow up. Okay, so as it turned out, even my heaviest impact wasn't enough to break this bolt loose here, and I think that they say that it's like 150 pounds plus 76 degrees or something, so I don't know what it turns out to be. You may be looking, usually when it starts approaching like 200 plus foot-pounds is when my heaviest impact just won't take them loose. So I had originally made a tool that would fit in around here and hold this and then hold it against this frame piece, but I couldn't find it and I didn't feel like making another one. So what you see here, I've got my 3-foot breaker bar, and this is just holding it from moving, this clamp. It's hitting against the concrete there to keep it from turning. But you know, you'll have to make sure that you got your car jacked up, you know, just the right height. But I've just got my 15/16, my breaker bar, and I bumped the starter over maybe 3 or 4 times, and it broke it loose. So definitely a lot easier than wasting a lot of time making a tool and everything. And I think the last time I took one of these loose, I wound up getting a 4-foot piece of pipe to break it loose. It's just a tremendous amount of torque from it sitting there, and just really sticks in there. So anyways, this worked pretty good. I'll probably use this method again. You know, obviously don't want you to do anything you feel unsafe with, but this is how I got this one loose, and I could tell by looking at it, it hadn't been messed with before. So that's usually, you know, when they're really, really tight, because they come from factory that way. So anyways, we're just going to go ahead and get the bolt out. Like I said, I got it completely loose at this point. Just that little bit. And once it breaks loose, it just basically comes out of here like nothing. And this is a really big bolt. So that's what you're looking at. So I got to get my so I was showing you these little threaded spots in here. I've got to get my bolts, if I've got them. I think they're a quarter or metric, I can't remember. But also, if you haven't messed with this, you're probably going to want to spray some WD-40 and kind of clean those threads out a little bit. Yeah, it's a good possibility they're rusted up and you're going to have difficulty, and you don't want to mess them up when you're doing this. So we're going to go ahead and get the puller and get those bolts in there and try to get this set up so we can pull this off. Okay, so I've just got the 3-jaw puller or 3-prong, and those turned out to be a 1/4 28, I do believe. Just, you know, make sure that they're going to thread in without damaging. Now you'll notice that this will come with this little puller. This is way smaller than the bolt, so I'm just going to thread this in to here without any worries of damaging my threads. Now normally if the bolt was about the same size as this, or maybe even smaller, then I would have to use a combination of my other puller, which has some bars, but in this case I don't have to worry about that. We're just going to thread this in, and this will push this off of here. I'm probably going to have to go down a pretty good ways here. Now I've kind of purposely left my puller here just slightly loose, that way if I'm just a little bit off center, it's going to center itself back up, or I can adjust it. So I'm just going to go ahead and just get this thing cranked down so I can get this pulled off of here at this point. Okay, I just didn't have quite enough with this to push it off of there, so if you don't have another kit, you could just put a piece of cut off piece of a bolt or a bar or something in there just to give you some more length. What I'm going to use is I've got another puller, and it's just designed with these bars with different lengths, and you just put it in the end of the bolt, and this one will fit in this puller as well. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. One thing I'd point out, definitely take your time with these 1/4 28s, and I would recommend getting some new bolts. I tried using my old ones and they were a little bit messed up, so about had a situation. So definitely I would suggest just getting you some brand new bolts. They're 3-inch. Make sure you got appropriate size washers, because it'll pull right through that puller if you don't have a big enough washer. Now why they don't use bigger bolts to pull something off like that, it's got so much force, I don't know, but make sure to get you some big enough washers. So I'm going to go ahead and just feed this thing into it, so it'll just go right in there and hit that crank, and I'm just going to start tightening this down. Okay, and it just took just a tiny bit more to get it loose there, so I've got it completely loose, and I'm going to go ahead and just pull it out of here now. Okay, and there we have that off, and you can see the inner workings of it and the rings, the reluctor rings. And now is, you know, not a bad idea to go ahead and do your seal if you're having some leakage and stuff. Go ahead and take care of that. Now next thing we've got to do is get our sensor unplugged, and then we just pop this cover here off. Okay, and then that just pops off those little studs, but it is on there really good, so I had to actually use a screwdriver to pop one end up. Okay, so now we can see our 2 studded bolts right there. So I don't know if this has an alignment, so I think I'm going to put a mark here somehow, and that way when I go to put this back, maybe I can get this in the exact location. Okay, so we just took the 2 those 1/2-inch studded bolts out, and now we're ready to go ahead and pop the sensor off of here. And it looks like I'm going to need both hands because it doesn't want to turn loose. Oh, there it goes. Okay, and we do have at least an alignment pin, so if I can get, I figured out what the space was, the top and bottom. I guess the main thing is just to get it even, and it should line itself back up close enough, so that's good. Okay, so now we just got to go ahead and get our replacement part in here. And here's the replacement part. It's a BWB, supposed to be a pretty good part, one of the best as far as the aftermarket. And there's the part number. So we're just going to go ahead and get this back up here and see if we can't get this thing running here. Okay, and with that one alignment pin and the bolts, it pretty much just goes right back into the exact spot it was in, so there's not any worries there. So I'm going to go ahead and just tighten these 1/2 inches back down. Okay, so I've just got that tightened and the wire connected there. I'm going to put that cover back on. And I want to just point out, when you're putting these bolts in that go down here, and you can see the little hole that's out here in the daylight, it's only going to go in like a little bit, you know, and it's going to hit the bottom out on the bottom of this reluctor ring thing, so you can't just keep cranking on it once it hits there. Once you go like a 1/2 inch or so, you just have to stop. When you keep turning on it, you're going to mess up the reluctor ring. So just wanted to point that out. So I'm just getting ready just to snap this back on here now. Okay, and I got ahead of myself. Make sure to snap that cover before you connect your wire back. Okay, so I just made sure that the keyway is lining up on the crank, and now I'm just going to put the bolt back in here, start tightening this down. Okay, we're just slowly tightening this back down by hand here to start with. Okay, lastly, I've just given it a final bit of torque with my impact here, and we're slipping the belt back on. Okay, and I'm going to just go ahead here in just a second. We're going to crank it up and see how it's going to do. Okay, so it's cranking up good. The true test will be taking it down the road, getting it good and warm, and then following up from there. But just the fact that I can turn it off and re-crank it tells me that we've got the problem fixed. So we're going to go ahead and get the wheel on. We'll take it down the road for a test drive. Okay, so we've just popped these little plastic rivets back into this cover right here, and I'm just getting ready to put the tire back on at this point.